Welcome to the Intentionists podcast, where we explore the interplay between intuition, spiritual health, and everything in between. I'm your host, Hilary.
And I'm Amy Schreiber. Our intention is to create a dialogue that inspires you to consciously forge your path with curiosity and compassion for life and its mysteries. Today we continue our Be Your Own Healer series with our very first interview. Hilary talks with Kaycie Hall, the owner and amazing teacher behind Elevate Community Yoga, and she offers some fantastic insight to her process of starting and building her business by focusing on community. They discuss the benefits of yoga, creating a business in the face of tragedy or fear, forging an authentic path, and what Kaycie does to stay grounded in the midst of it all. So for those of you who are on the fence about going after a new goal or starting your own business, you're going to love this episode because they really dive into being intentional with your mission throughout the entrepreneurial process. And in the few months since this episode was recorded, Kaycie's yoga community has continued to grow and evolve in amazing ways. She's created a teacher's training program and developed a really robust Ashtanga community. And she's only coming up on the year anniversary of her business opening, so pretty awesome work for 1 year. To learn more about Kaycie and her business, you can visit elevatecommunityyoga.com and listen on to her insightful discussion with Hilary.
Kaycie, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yay, thank you for having me.
So why don't you talk a little bit about how you got into, tell us a little bit about you and what brought you to yoga and how that eventually evolved into creating the space for your own studio.
Awesome. So I had actually never done yoga most of my adult years until I was 25. And I just wanted to start being more healthy overall, and I'd always heard really good things about it, and I actually tried it for my first time on a P90X workout video. And
I know that video. I know that yoga routine. Done that before. Funny.
Not the best representation, but a good segue into where I am now. I definitely got into it more for the physical reasons, the benefits physically. And which, I mean, I still feel offers a lot of the benefits, but over time I started to really feel myself noticing more internal changes, more awareness of myself, the things that I was doing, and trying to be more conscious of my day-to-day activities and kind of just who I was, like drawing that self-awareness. And once I got to that point, I felt like I was completely hooked in the practice. And I started just teaching classes to my friends and decided to jump into the teacher training program pretty much immediately after I dove into the practice. And it just kind of helped deepen my understanding of yoga and just solidifying the idea that I really wanted to be an instructor. And so after doing that, I reached out to some local places, and I feel like I've pretty much taught everywhere in this local area. And after teaching for about 4.5 years at different places, I feel like just following my internal compass, it eventually brought me to opening up my own studio and being able to kind of serve the community in a different way.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, it's hard to believe that you just started doing yoga like 5 years ago because you're so, I mean, we'll link to Kaycie's Instagram in the notes, but she is like amazing. And I go to a lot of her classes, and she's a wonderfully intuitive teacher. And you also do climbing. So how did that, were you climbing before, or was this like all kind of, it seems like it really complements each other, the climbing and the yoga and just that internal core strength?
Absolutely. I am so grateful that I found climbing, although I will say it's probably the source of any injuries that I deal with that yoga helps to nurture and heal. But I actually, relationships, I started climbing up in San Francisco when I was seeing someone up there, and I really started to love it. And after that whole thing passed, I feel like I got introduced to going outside, and this was about last year around May time. I went outdoors and did my first outdoor climb, and I was so nervous, but I started to realize that yoga helps so much with it, with body awareness, learning how to shift your weight, your balance, and a lot of the core strengthening aspects. And for me, I feel like they're well complemented, not just for the flexibility and strength purposes, but I mean, it's a mental practice as well. But I also really love it because it's a lot of the opposing muscles that you would use in a yoga class. So it helps to keep the body well balanced, I feel.
For sure. So I want to just get back to the process of you creating the space for your own studio, right? Because this series that we're talking, the last few episodes we've been doing is under the umbrella of how to be your own healer. And I really thought you would be great for this because I've been to so many of your classes, and I think that you have such an amazing intuitive ability to tune into your students. And, you know, every time you walk into your studio, you feel so much love. And I think that's, I mean, just as someone who attends, you know, I think that's a real unique gift. So I wanted to just talk to you about the process of like what it was like emotionally, what it was like internally when you decided to kind of step out on your own and start your own space, just for any of our listeners who are kind of in that space where they're like, and tell them a little bit about like where you're at in your life. Like, do you have kids? Are you married? You know, just so people kind of understand when they're listening where you're at in your life and how they can kind of relate to that themselves.
Right. I mean, I'm definitely in a position. I'm 30 right now. I don't have any kids. I'm not married, and I feel very open and able to receive kind of whatever direction comes to me. And I've always been one that's definitely taught, follow what feels right, follow your instinct, your internal guide. I think that is ultimately one of the best decisions I ever chose to make, opening up my studio. So I really like the whole, the healing behind this whole topic and everything, because this studio actually came from a really, really dark time for me. Last year, going through a really devastating breakup and basically having my entire life turned upside down. I felt extremely lost during those moments. I felt financially, I couldn't even stand on my own 2 feet. I felt like I was living out of my bag, kind of hopping around, living with different people, sleeping on couches. And it was a very depressing time for me. And I felt pressured to go out and get some 40-hour work week job that would definitely pay my bills, but ultimately would strip me of the things that I am truly passionate about, which is teaching yoga. And during those moments, I had to really dig deep and just remind myself of why I do the things that I do. I do yoga because not only is it nurturing for me, but I know that message is something that I want to help give out to the community, to be able to help other people understand that, yeah, times are tough at moments and you kind of just have to work through it and keep staying true to your intention. And so after going through those moments, I had somebody, one of my students actually, who reached out to me and offered me a place to stay. And this all came from me blogging and kind of sharing my vulnerability of the situation I was going through. And after she reached out to me, she gave me a free place to stay for a while, and definitely took advantage of that opportunity to kind of grow and recognizing, okay, it's scarier than anything I've ever done in my life, but I knew that I had to kind of step out of that comfort zone if I wanted to move forward and grow a business for myself. So I'm really glad that I had such a dark time happen to me. And I say happen to me, but I feel like all of those things really do happen for a reason, because I'm grateful for being here now.
Desperation is a great place to start from, honestly. No, I'm serious. I mean, that's how when we started our business, I think, we've talked in previous episodes about just like coming from like your highest place. But sometimes, you know, amazing things happen out of desperation or out of really dark times. And I think that's really important for people to consider. I find that like nothing makes you more motivated than when you're hungry.
Absolutely.
You know, when you're like literally like, how am I going to provide for my kids, or how am I going to pay my bills? Or like you said, you were literally without a home, and you're like, there was like a point where life brings you kind of to your knees, and it's like, okay, you got to dig deep and you got to decide, and how is this really going to be? So, so walk me through like how you go from living on a friend's couch to like opening your own place.
Right. I know, like, trust me, this past year has been crazy because, you can't always predict what's going to happen. It kind of happens and it falls into your lap, and you just kind of have to roll with it and put in the work behind it. But, so like I said, when I got the opportunity to live, with one of my students, who is now one of my really dear friends, moving into their place. And trust me, I mean, I resisted it so much. I just wanted things to go back to how they were before. And once I kind of opened myself up to my students, I mean, I was teaching classes, and I actually think you were at one of my classes where I just brought the emotional aspect into my practice and kind of taught other people to be open to the emotions that arise in a yoga practice. And I started to realize, okay, this is what I want to do. I just have to keep moving forward in this direction. And so I was teaching at just one studio at the time. And I was really grateful for the opportunities I was given to kind of help myself financially, more classes and whatnot. And then after living at my place for a while and kind of staying afloat, but not really super pushing forward towards any specific goal, I felt like I was a little bit lost in the overall direction of where I wanted to take things. And once again, it took one day of just kind of feeling like the where I was teaching, what I was doing wasn't really aligning deep down inside with my intention of what yoga is to me and how I can provide that to the people in this community.
Well, and sometimes there really is just like a point, right? Where you, with every entrepreneur, you know, where you just go like, okay, am I going to build my own business or not? You know, and that's kind of, that seems like that is a tough place for everyone to be in, because there's always relationships involved and things. And there, you know, it can be a little bit scary. So I can relate to that. That's kind of a scary thing.
And I feel like I've always kind of had, like, I've wanted to be an entrepreneur. I've always wanted to open up my own thing or start my own thing. But I've always been kind of the one person that likes to dip my toes in and slowly ease into something and let it happen organically. And with this whole situation, it was more like I had to make a decision, like, this is what I'm going to do. And I'm going to have to dive in head first and put all of my energy and focus into doing that, which was so terrifying.
Yes, totally. Well, and I wanted to just bring up, for any of our listeners who are kind of like at that point where they're like, should I like break out on my own, or like at what, you know, they're at that, like, you know, that's like a perfect age, like 30, you've had enough life experience to like, you've been on your own, you've been grinding it out, you've been developing yourself with it professionally in a career or whatever it is. And whether it's yoga or not, you know, there just comes a point where it's like, okay, I've lived enough life. Now people start taking you seriously when you're about 30 years old. I find, at least for me, there was like a really big difference between like 30 and 35, where I just felt like, oh yeah, I'm a real adult now. Like people look at me like they take me seriously, where you're kind of like trying to convince people before then. But anyway, my point is you get to this place and you're like ready to move forward. And now you have a part for your studio mission. Oh, and what I was going to say, sorry, I lost my train of thought for a second. But what it was is you always struck me, because I've been taking class from you for like almost 2 years, I want to say, maybe even longer. Mm-hmm. I don't even know. Yeah, it's been a while. But you really, initially, you really just struck me as like a brilliant creative. You know, I remember going to class and being like, how does she, like, I was going through a really hard time with our business. We were selling and things were just falling apart, and yoga was like what got me through. And I felt like I would come in and you would do and say things where I was like, how does she know? How did she know that was exactly the practice I needed? It was like the perfect amount of intensity. It was so mindful. It was so thoughtful. And I thought, she's so creative. And that is a part of like I think, a good sign of an entrepreneur, but I really looked at you more of like an artist. And like but what I've seen with you developing your business and really breaking out on your own is you're like a master at building community. And so that is going to segue into this next section, which I wanted to talk to you about. You have a big mission. Part of your studio is to create community. And I think you do that really, really well. So talk to me a little bit about that. Like, how are you creating community, and why is your studio's donation based? So why that path?
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you. Because I do really, truly believe that yoga is, especially Vinyasa yoga, it's an art form, right? I feel like it allows that creative expression. And
I say that not to say like, to put someone in a box, but more like, like for people to say, like, if you think that I'm really creative, I don't think I could run a business. This is like, you've like developed beyond, I mean, I just think I have a ton of respect for your business process, and I think you've done an amazing job, and you've just grown so much. So I say that in terms of, as an outsider, that like, you can be a super intuitive person and be all creativity and connection and still go out and build a successful business. So anyway, that was my point. Anyway, continue on. I apologize to interrupt.
No
I just wanted to
worries.
clarify that I didn't want you to think I was like putting you into a box.
Oh, no. I love the box of being an artist and entrepreneur. I think all of those things tie in so much together. And I realized with the community aspect, having a little bit of that intuitive nature. And I don't think it's something that some people have, some people don't. I think it's something that you learn to tap into, and you learn how to read a room, and you can feel someone's energy. You know, if people are feeling tired, you know, if they need something a little more relaxing, or you know, if they need to be pushed a little bit. And I think forming relationships with my students over the course of the years really helped me to get a deeper understanding of them, which in turn helped me become a better instructor in learning where everyone was at in their practices and kind of what they were needing. And ultimately, I feel like my students are the biggest teachers of all. But over those times, it really took me understanding the importance of community when I did go through that hard time, because when I started practicing the vulnerability of blogging, sharing myself, the experience I was going through, the hurt that I was having at the time, that's when my community came forward for me and picked me up and basically carried me through all those dark times. And that's when it clicked in my head that, oh my gosh, these people have touched my life before this moment, but now I'm recognizing that this is what it's all about. It's all about the service. If when I need them, they're there for me. I want to be there for them on a constant basis and be able to serve them and be able to bring the community together. So community-based automatically stood out for me as a really, really important aspect of my business model when I moved forward. And I had actually a lot of resistance from family and friends when I even mentioned the word donation. And especially other local entrepreneurs were like, I think that people will take advantage of you. And that very well might be true in some cases, but ultimately I deep down believe in karma. And I know that what I put in will always come back around. And some people who can't afford to will come in, they'll take classes for free. And then maybe when they're going through a better time in their lives, they'll be able to contribute to the community, because overall it's the experience that they have when they come in. They recognize that we're here for you. There's other people that come in and are happy to pay more to know that it keeps the community going. And for me, I think it's such a beautiful balance, and it just shows that we're all here together to practice together, to grow together. And I love hosting more community type events where people come together that have never met before, and getting those introductions, kind of breaking through the ice, and knowing that you can practice together and just feel each other's energy, get to know one another, and watch each other grow through the yoga practice.
It's amazing. And I think, like you said, it starts with like you having a genuine love for people that people can then feel. And then, like you said, the community kind of naturally starts to form, right?
Right.
But at the same time, you've had a lot of new people coming in. So talk to me a little bit about like how the social media community aspect has worked for you, because I think you do that really well.
Thank you.
Why don't you talk a little bit about like where you're at on social media, what you do? I think you offer classes on social media, right? You have like a subscription. So talk a little bit about that.
So the whole social media thing actually just started when I wanted to record my own personal practice. And this is when I first started yoga. So it's kind of funny, having those little Facebook reminders that show like years back and you're like, oh my gosh. But
right, I know.
It started just sharing my own thing. And, over time you post enough of yourself doing yoga that people associate you as you're now the yoga person. And it just kind of continued to grow from there. And then when I started teaching, obviously it shifted into more of like taking pictures and of my students and my classes and showing, there's people coming, there's people growing in their practices, and also showing the diversity of the classes, the different people that were coming and the different people that are able to do yoga. And I mean, there's men, there's people that are dealing with being overweight. There's people that are dealing through injuries, like whatever it may be. It just kind of shows that like everyone's doing this. And I think it started to draw more attention into people. And once again, it's like planting a seed. And then maybe a year later, that one person who had that seed planted is now interested and wants to come take a class. And so it's kind of grown. And I feel like social media has always been an easy way for me to kind of reach out. And I mean, I feel like the following has kind of built over time. And then it was all very personal at that time. It was just about me building my own personal brand. And then when I decided to open up Elevate, I've kind of shifted back from more of the personal representation and kind of focused more on the community. I want to take pictures of the community. I want to highlight people in the community and certain events and whatnot. So I felt like that part it's honestly the easiest part for me, is just getting out there and connecting with people. And as far as online classes, I actually started doing that before I decided to open up my studio, and that was going to be my main focus. And I kind of took the back seat with that when I put all my energy and attention into teaching actual studio classes.
That's a good lesson too. I talk about that often when people ask me about like the clothing company that we built, like, so how did you get started? And I was like, we're going to sell jewelry at like hospital shows. Like you say, like you just start something, you have an idea, you go down a path, and then you're like, okay, well that could work, but this is actually working better. Like, so now, like you say, we're limited on time, right? That's like our most precious commodity that anyone has, really. So it's like, where are you developing your time? I'm sure that you'll continue to develop online stuff as you move along. But like you say, you were kind of like, let's build this personal brand thing. And now, never mind, there's this community thing that's exploding and it's doing awesome. So it's part of it's like kind of just start down a path and see what opens up for you, because it always seems to be that things do open up as you just start moving forward. You do a great job with creative community events. I love your partnerships with local businesses. We live in a town that it's Modesto, California. Has like the economy's kind of turning around, but I would say like nationwide, I feel like I've seen on like Business Insider's like worst places to live that we like rank on those lists, which I don't think is totally fair, because it's really nice here. The weather's great. And I think, you and I have talked about this before, that something wants to be had in this space. Like I feel like that things are shifting, and I think that this will be a very different place in 10 years. But I think what you do is really cool. So talk a little bit about your creative community events and your partnerships.
Right. So kind of tying back into the whole Modesto thing. I used to be one that wanted to escape Modesto. I would probably want to live anywhere else but Modesto.
It's hard too when you have all those beautiful, like San Francisco's an hour and a half away. So when you're like putting Modesto next to like the Golden Gate Bridge, we just don't look that great. But when you think of like any other American city, it's like, this is not that bad. Anyway.
Exactly.
Sorry.
And being one that was like born and raised in Modesto, I feel like even more so, it's just like, let's just go somewhere else. But then I also came to realize, if it is just a short drive away to San Francisco or Yosemite or to the beach, wherever it is that you want to go, it is such a short drive that why not, just have a home base where it's affordable, it's nice, you can go around and enjoy these things. But I really started to understand how amazing the Modesto community was. You can look at Modesto as a whole, and you can probably look at the drug use or car theft, whatever it is that you want to focus your energy on. And I think that is the biggest thing right there, is where do you want to direct the energy? And I feel for most of us that want to dwell on the negative and see it as a bad thing, that's constantly going to kind of cloud our vision of being able to really see how many amazing people are here. And I'm so grateful for yoga that has kind of led me to some of the most amazing, nicest people ever. And so hosting these events, I've always kind of loved teaching workshops and coming up with new innovative ideas for being able to bring people together and to share yoga. And so when I opened the studio, it was more so just thinking like, what would be fun, because I think that yoga can definitely be a serious practice. I like it to be a little lighthearted and enjoyable, but ultimately I think the playfulness behind it is what makes people want to come and enjoy and to bring people with them and to share that experience. So, coming up, tonight I even have live music with a slow flow yoga, and on Tuesday for Halloween, some glow in the dark yoga. And it's like, why not just make it fun?
You've done some like wine and yoga, like with Camp 4, which is like a little restaurant and winery type. Well, I guess it's not a winery, but it's a bar, isn't it? What is it? A bar? What would you call it?
It's like a wine bar.
A wine bar. Thank you. I was like
a little wine cafe. Yes. And honestly, they're awesome. In talking about partnering up with local places, that was actually a huge one, just because his dad being Royal Robbins and having such a connection into the outdoor climbing world with Yosemite. It seemed just like a really natural pairing when we came together. And I mean, we've had a couple events there and they've sold out and been amazing. And, I love that too, because not only is it helping to build connections and networking with other people, building these strong relationships, and support is a huge thing. I want to be able to support local. They want to help support me. And I think that that's great. And then also being able to meet so many people through each other. And I think that that's what everything should be about, is not necessarily how can I build my business, but how can I help someone else build their business? And by in turn, when you put your energy out into other people, I truly feel the things that we're lacking are the things we're not giving enough of.
Amen,
so,
man. Amen. Totally. Well, and I think, like you say, it comes back to intent, because I think when you're running a business, you are concerned about the bottom line. You are concerned about filling classes. You are concerned about keeping the lights on. But what really helps the exponential growth is the vision and the intent behind what you're doing. And I think that also helps with sustainability in a business, because you can continue to infuse your passion. When it becomes, all about the bottom line, the joy is kind of sucked right out of that. So for any small business owners or people that are getting started, I think you've given some really great advice, and really the creative, the creative community interaction is just so wonderful. And I think that's really where I think millennials care about that. I see the younger generation really latching on to that. And that's like where it's headed. I really have a lot more optimism in humanity than the stuff I see on the news. I think there are a lot of people like you in the world and who want to do this, who are leaders in community building through their businesses and through their intentions. But then there's also a lot of people who want to be a part of that community, who are like, maybe I can't be the leader and I've got to do some other things, but love that there are people like you out there creating space for that. So I want to segue back and on topic with the how to be your own healer. I thank you so much for all that business insight. I think that's just really, really great. Really great. So let's talk about creating sacred space. Are there any rituals that you do to help create a sacred space, like in classes, when you move into the building, at home?
So meditation is huge for me in that regard. I feel like it's all about planting the intention in your space and staying true to that intention. So when I first came into my space, I literally sat, I meditated, I breathed, I even did handstands, I did the practice, I did the things that I loved doing. And in my opinion, it's when you start to create that good energy in your space, you are manifesting that energy to cultivate, to grow. And so when I came in here, it's just, I visualized, I manifested that to happen. I visualized people being in the room. I imagined how the energy would feel. And I planted that seed of saying, this is how it's going to be. I already know that it's basically not allowing that negative space for thought of what if this happens, or what if it feels like this, or, what if nobody shows. It was more so concentrating on it thriving, it growing, it feeling good, the energy, the visualizations. I feel like that was huge when I first came into, and it was amazing how it exceeded my expectations when the doors actually opened.
Absolutely. I love that. So what are some of the common themes you see among your students? Like what calls them to the studio?
So, I mean, I feel like that once again comes back to the diversity of the classes, because there are a lot of people I feel like come in for the physical benefits, just like I once did. And I've also seen that kind of evolve with time and growing a deeper understanding of self. Ultimately, I want to cultivate a space where people feel safe for self-expression. Like I said before, vinyasa is a creative practice, and I want everyone to have the takeaway of, I came in, I did what I could do, what my body was able to do, and I'm grateful for that space. I'm grateful for wherever I am in my body, and I'm grateful for the body I'm in. So ultimately, it's more acceptance and full just embodiment of where you're at, and knowing, that there's no typical body type that does yoga, and just kind of breaking through those negative mental barriers and to overall gain a deeper sense of self-awareness. That's really my main goal for everyone.
So you kind of create the space, and then you create the dialogue, the healthy dialogue around body image, around expression, so then people can come in and do their own work, right?
Absolutely.
Synthesize that? Mm-hmm. Okay, what do you do when you're scared or when you're in fear?
I sweat, first of all, but nobody sees that. Honestly,
because I know there's scary parts about running a business. Having run a business, it's a healthy balance of like complete and utter bliss and just thrill and adrenaline rush mixed with like deep, terrifying fear. So what do you do when you're in fear?
I still feel like I'm in fear. I still feel like that's always there. The biggest thing with any business that you open is you don't really know month to month how things are going to look. Some months are going to be great. Some months are going to be a little bit tight, and the fear can set in, especially in the moments that things do feel tight. I think it's just when you notice the fear is there, recognize that fear is a healthy motivator, that fear is there to remind us of our intention rather than to stray away from it. And it's to help us.
That's like a tweetable right there. Remind us of our intention. Wisdom from Kaycie. Great.
And I feel like, it's good to be scared. If you're not scared, you're obviously not doing something big enough for yourself. So if you have that fear, just know that it's healthy to feel that, as long as you don't let it overpower and, lead you to making, weird, crazy decisions based on finances, especially. It's just keep moving forward and think, what more can you give? How much more can you give? How much can you serve? And ultimately that fear really does subside. It's more, shift the focus to gratitude, focus on something positive. And I mean, like I said, the fear is a good thing. Just let it move you forward rather than backwards.
I love that. What are some of your self-care rituals? What do you do to keep yourself sane? Holding that kind of space, I think can be like, you can absorb others' energy if you're an empath, right? I mean, so what do you do?
Absolutely.
What do you do for your self-care?
Well, once again, meditation is great. I love that for being able to kind of, cleanse, understand where I'm at and everything. Getting outdoors it's just something I've always loved doing. And for me, I get outside, I take that big breath of fresh air. I enjoy completely disconnecting from social media, from, having to talk and having to be around a whole bunch of people. It's kind of my escape. And, as most of my students know, I don't typically work on the weekends. And, it took me a long time to come to terms with that, because, some people may look at it as being like, you own a business, you should be putting in all that time and work. And I think it's important to, first of all, focus on the balance. If you don't have balance of stillness, rest, and to be able to completely disconnect, then ultimately you're going to run yourself ragged. You're going to get yourself to the point where you take the passion out of what it is that you're doing. And
especially if you're in it for the long term. I find,
absolutely.
Like with mine, I agree with you in that, sometimes if you're building something, a business or, a clientele, whatever it is that you're working on, you have to throw everything into it. And especially when you have kids, at least I found this, it was like, I could do 2 out of 3. I could either be a great business person and a good mom, or I could be a great business person and take care of myself, or I could take care of myself and be a good mom and not a good business person. But I couldn't really do all three when I was scaling as quickly as I was. But that wasn't sustainable. I eventually ran completely out of gas. So I agree with you that if you're looking at this, if you're looking at Elevate Community Yoga and you're saying, I want this to be my long-term life's work. I want this to be part of why I'm on this planet. And then you're absolutely right. You have to do that. You have to take your self-care. That's one of the whole like missions of this podcast, is to teach people, like, while you're on your path, stop and enjoy the flowers, take a deep breath.
And it's hard to do because you can feel inspired all the time to want to keep doing something. I mean, there's been nights where I just stay, after class and I'm here for hours, just, brainstorming, coming up with ideas. And then there's also the times where I have to remind myself, like, it's okay. Like, you have to really give yourself that permission to say, I'm going to step away, and this is for the good of my business. I'm stepping away to be able to nurture myself. I mean, just like any other relationship, right? If we don't take care of ourselves first, and we don't really have anything to nurture with. So I feel like I'm taking vacation for you guys.
Yeah. So for you, it's meditation, it's hiking, it's climbing, anything else?
Like I said, outdoors, that's really all I need. If I have my little pause, my reset button to go outdoors, I enjoy reading. I mean, the knowledge aspect helps me to feel inspired when I come back onto my mat and teach a class. I think it's just ultimately save the space for the things that you love doing. Save you want to keep the passion alive. I'll take that time. I'll go take a yoga class, whatever it is. It's just nurture yourself with the things that make you feel good.
How do you avoid being the wounded healer? And by that, I mean, the wounded healer is kind of like it's like, not that you're the victim, but that a lot of people are drawn to healing work because of trauma. And so like he who suffers the wounds of life, will understand more. So how do you avoid being a victim? How do you avoid, so how do you avoid being the wounded healer? As I look at you like a healer. I mean, what you're doing, you're an entrepreneur, but like when I come into your classes, I always leave like, I have to tell you at the end, I always in my mind at the very end of the meditation, and I do this with all my yoga teachers because I think it's such a beautiful service that yoga teachers give the gift of yoga, is in my mind's eye, I always surround you guys with light and love and just, all of that. Cause I think, gosh, they just gave everything out, So I'm going to do that. So anyway, how do you avoid being the wounded healer for like that's the fifth time I've asked it. I apologize.
Yeah, no, it's fine. I honestly, I've never really felt like there's certain moments where, being more of an empath, like I do feel like I've absorbed some of the energy and whatnot. And I feel like, essential oils have been really huge for me for kind of protecting my barriers, using clove oil, especially creating healthy barriers and, just protecting my energetic space. And I do feel like a healer and wanting to open myself up to let others feel like they can open themselves up as well. But, vulnerability, once again, that's a huge part of this, being able to open up. But that part of vulnerability and self-awareness is recognizing that we're owning ourselves. We're owning all the feelings that arise in our class. And I feel like that's something I try to emphasize to students too, is see what it is, don't judge it, but just be with it. Like own what comes up. And not everything that comes up for us is good, right? We have trauma, we have past experiences that arise. And I think taking responsibility for it is huge within myself or within my students, being able to own where you are, even the bad situations in our life. And once again, being able to grow from it rather than to allow it to bring us down. And I think once you can open yourself up to that, I don't really feel like I struggle with, feeling victimized by anything or feeling like I am absorbing any of.
Or like you're doing your healing work because there's a hole inside of you.
Right.
I'm saying?
I feel like I've done the work for myself, and I'm continuing to do the work for myself, that it doesn't feel, I don't feel any of that negative space at all. And I definitely want to encourage other people to be able to come into that same energetic space too.
Awesome. That brings me to my next question. So what does doing your own spiritual work mean to you? What does that look like for you?
Honestly, it's amazing because you can feel really good in your space. You can feel very aware. You can feel like you've you've drawn a lot of conclusions from past experiences and helped yourself to grow. And you may feel like you're in a place where like, yeah, I feel really good right now. And then something happens, the rug gets pulled out from underneath you. And then all of a sudden you're looking at yourself through new eyes. And I think for me, the continuation of spiritual growth and healing is all just being open to relearning everything and understanding that I don't know anything. And just when you think you do, the universe will show you just how much you need to be humbled.
Yep. Wise words from Kaycie for sure. I like that. It's so true. Be open to relearning everything. And that I feel like I've had multiple times in my life where that's been the case where, you think, oh, I've dealt with that. That's fine. And then out of nowhere, something comes up and you're like, why is this still here?
And it's just not being resistant. I mean, the more we're open and less resistant to the changes and lessons we have, the way easier it is for us to continue growing forward.
I love that. I love that about approaching yoga as a spiritual practice, because it does kind of give you the space to be like, all right, just like breathe through it. Here you are. Some days you can stretch and some days you can't. And some days things bubble up and some days they don't. And, we're like, we have an internal weather system going on. Some days it's sunny and some days it's cloudy and you've got to deal with weather differently. It's
absolutely.
Yeah. So what advice would you give to people about like the first steps they can take to self-heal from whatever may be driving them? What's a good way to start? If you're like just kind of awakening and you're like, okay, what's going on? What are like two or three tips you could give people?
One of the biggest things for me is start to notice your reactions. By recognizing our reactions, that's when we start to really understand who we are. I feel like we should become less reactive and more responsive in life. So whenever I start to feel myself come up with an instant emotional reaction, I have always given myself now the rule of take 3 really deep breaths, close your eyes, and just feel that. And usually by the time I'm done with my 3rd breath, I no longer want to act on that impulse of my reaction. And it has taught me that just because we have emotional responses or reactions to certain things doesn't mean that's who we are. And for me, it's been able to kind of, okay, I'm ready to rip that weed out, plant a new seed. And each time I've taken that pause for the breath to be able to kind of, okay, where am I at? How do I feel? Is this really how I want to respond right now? Is this coming from a place of love and compassion for myself or for others? And when I recognize it doesn't line up with that, I usually notice, okay, this has been in me for a while. This is something that I've probably been doing my whole life and just never have been aware of. And once I notice that, it's like, okay, I understand that I'm hot-headed or that I'm impatient or that I want to say bad things in a heated conversation. And once I know that and I recognize I have the power to choose. I can choose how I'm going to respond in this situation. I have the control of myself. Then I can choose to basically rewire my brain into now having new responses, new reactions, and those reactions are positive and healthy. And the more we can rip out those bad weeds and replant those good seeds and we water them on a daily basis, then it really does show us that we aren't one way or another. We aren't born to be this or that. We may have certain impulses and reactions that feel easier to come to. And maybe we deal with those for our whole life. We see that they're there, but we don't act on them as much as we grow more aware of it and we choose to create more healthy habits. And I feel like ultimately that is the biggest step in any kind of spiritual healing and growth is drawing that self-awareness and not playing a victim and making the choice to move forward in a positive way.
I love the analogy of the ripping out the weeds and planting the good seeds, because sometimes it helps to have a visual, when you're looking at your life. The one lesson I keep being taught over and over, and I find, Amy and I have recorded a few series now, and it's like whenever we're in the series, it seems like life just keeps giving me more things to deal with around that topic. But I had a week last week that was just like super intense and gosh, I had the opportunity to become aware of just how when you are going through a hard time, I tend to be really hard on myself. Like, why aren't you functioning like a normal person? Why aren't you like doing your same output that you normally do? and kind of giving the space to have down days, or to have, you know, if you are recognizing, like when you're in this process of doing this deep self-healing, that sometimes dealing with those realizations, like you said, if sometimes these things can be lifetime, you know, maybe I've been doing this my whole life and I'm just now aware of it at 30 years old or however old we are. That can be those can be tough things to realize, and they can take you down for a little bit of time, and to give yourself,
can be very emotional,
and give yourself the space to like process that, you know?
Right.
What advice do you have for people debating on taking the jump into entrepreneurship?
Ooh, so this one, that's such a great question. And ultimately, what my biggest word of advice to anyone is, don't let your direction for stepping forward into a new business just be financial gain. Well, and especially with a new business, right? You can't really expect to be making much money for the first couple of years anyways. But ultimately, I think it all leads down to your intention. What is your intention? Is it self-serving, or does it help to, is there a purpose behind it that serves others? And I feel like when we do, not to say that a business can't be successful, right? That people strive after money, and I've seen lots of people grow from that and, you know, thrive on greed. And
but even still, I think making money is a really good thing. I'm a huge fan of everybody making as much money as possible. So I think, like you said,
absolutely.
But you're right. If that's the only driver, it can tend to be an empty pursuit over time.
That's exactly it. I just feel like when you go in a direction and there's love behind it, there's intention to serve, there's purpose behind it, the reward behind it is much different.
Yes.
That it's something that you're going to wake up and you're going to love doing. And ultimately, that's the reason why I started this business. It was not to be rich. It was not to like make sure I make X amount of money. Now, of course, I would love to financially grow. And if I did financially grow into a place where, you know, I'm feeling really comfortable in that financial space, then how can I grow that and continue growing this into my purpose and into my service? And obviously my goals and my mission is probably going to be different than someone else's, but ultimately, always my word of advice to people is just follow your heart and make sure your intention is true.
I really get that from you, Kaycie. I really do. What is the biggest lesson owning your own studio has taught you?
Whew, be humbled. It has taught me patience. It's taught me perseverance. It's taught me, once again, that same concept of talking about earlier is when I feel like I'm lacking, give more. How can I give more? And how can I serve more? And it's taught me a lot about myself in regards to my stress levels. I used to be a very, very high stress person before yoga. And I feel like now when I get into the space of, I mean, it's all unknowing. You can only predict so much of what's going to happen on a month-to-month basis. And for me, it's just, you know, keeping myself sane, self-nurturing, taking care of myself. And I think ultimately it's just learning the patience to just keep moving forward regardless of any ups and downs, and overall seeing that everything will come back around as long as I continue staying true. And, you know, even if, like, of course I want to grow a successful business, but deep down, even if my business failed, I would know, okay, it's that I took a step forward. This is going to guide me to where I need to go next, as long as I just keep pushing forward.
And that, I think, it's looking at life as the process and the journey rather than the result, or the end, you know, the destination. And, I love that you said that, because I think like you said, you know, I don't foresee your business failing anytime soon, but if it did, you've learned like so much, like you know, part of it, I think I've had significant failures in my life, and I've had pretty big successes. And I remember when our business was getting going, there was a moment where I realized I had about 10 years where I was just kind of barely making it as an actor, dancer. You know, I was just spread out everywhere. I was doing some production. I was working on little gigs here and there. I was helping with photography. I was dancing. I was choreographing. I was doing everything. And I remember thinking after I had my son and I was sitting with my husband, and I was like, why did I even do that? What a waste of like 5 years. And then we started our business, and I freaking knew everything. I knew how to do everything because I had done everything. And it was like, Oh my gosh. And I had such a leg up on our competition, I feel like. So I think, like you said, whatever may happen, if you're following your heart and you're being, you're trying to just learn as much as you can, you're going to take that knowledge with you for sure. There's no reason to fear,
Right. You brought up earlier about taking just a step forward. And I feel like that is the most important thing. As long as you're taking a step forward, rather than thinking, is this the right step forward? Is this the right direction? As long as you're moving forward, you will be redirected as you need. But ultimately, you're going to gain everything from where you're at. It's a stepping stone, no matter where it is that you're stepping. And ultimately, you're going to find your way going to where you need to go and collecting all the little bits of information and knowledge necessary.
I love it. Thank you so much for that.
Hey,
so Kaycie,
course.
thank you for this. This was so fun. And I wanted you to just tell everyone how they can find you. So if you want to just plug any of your websites or whatever, now would be a great time. So how can people get in touch with you?
So like I said before, I'm going everything through my business now, Elevate Community Yoga, located in Modesto, California. It's in the Roseburg Shopping Center. Most people know it. Yogurt Mill, you know about it. And if you want any of the information, feel free to check it out, our website, elevatecommunityyoga.com. If you'd like to find or connect with me personally, you can find me on Facebook. I do a lot of the social media type stuff. Kaycie, Kaycie, and Hall, Hall. I would love to connect with more people, and especially if you're into the similar things, you have similar kind of, direction and thoughts, ideas, and overall viewpoints of life. I would love to connect with others.
Elevate Community Yoga on Instagram. Are you on Instagram both as Kaycie Hall and Elevate?
Yes.
What about Twitter? Any of those other?
I don't do Twitter, but Instagram, I love Instagram. I love the photo documentation. You can find it either Elevate Community Yoga or it's Kaycie Nicole, Nikole, one word.
We'll make sure that we put that in the blog posts, like the show notes, so that will be there.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Kaycie. I love the whole attitude, and it's right in line with our mission here at the Intentionists, where it's really, the hope is that through empowering ourselves and understanding our inner voice and our inner wisdom, that we'll make empowering decisions to live the life that we love and to hopefully make this world a better place, because that's really what we need.
Thank you so much. I had so much fun.
Before we part, we'd like to say thanks for listening, and we hope you'll connect with us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. We would love to hear from you and appreciate all feedback, shares, and likes.
To learn more and subscribe to our newsletter, visit Intentionists.com. And no matter where you are or what you're creating, we send you love and invite you to breathe and begin.
See you next week.